Good morning and welcome. My name is Austin Holmes, and I'm your host I'm the host of the Dallas Housing Coalition's Housing for All webinar series. I am also fortunate to serve as a member of the Dallas Housing Coalition Steering Committee. Last week, in my first episode, I gave you a little background on my life and my work as a senior development associate at Dominion, a leading national developer, owner, and manager of affordable housing. While I hail from the DC metro area, originally, I'm proud to now call Dallas my home. I have a keen interest in equitable development, which is going to make today's conversation very, very fun. On behalf of Dominion, we are honored to sponsor this year's webinar series. For those new here, this is the 41st installment of the Housing for All series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. We hope you have been enjoying these impactful one-on-one conversations with DHC members and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping Dallas affordable. Our guest today is Dr. Lauren Carter, with 2 decades of education and experience spanning civil engineering, law, higher education, public policy, and urban planning. Dr. Carter is now the founder and CEO of C-Suite Equity Consulting, an award-winning equity, justice, and social impact firm where she works to foster equity through strategy development, research, and capacity building to make urban spaces equitable places. A Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business and Chase business coaching alum, please join me in welcoming Dr. Carter to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm excited for this conversation. You know, your background has spanned a variety of different things. So you definitely have a lot of interesting thoughts and from a lot of different perspectives to add in this conversation that we're having about housing here in Dallas. So to begin, could you elaborate on the mission of C-Suite Equity Consulting and how your diverse background informs the firm's approach to promoting equity and justice in urban development?
Absolutely. So one, thank you for the invitation to be here. And we're excited to join the conversation and be the 41st episode. So I will tell you, C-Suite Equity Consulting, we work with mission-focused organizations, businesses, and government entities to make neighborhoods environmentally healthy, socially connected, and economically vibrant. And we do that through strategy development, research, training, and speaking, like things like today, where we get a chance to talk about these topics in more depth and give some insight into what we think can be solutions in communities to move them forward collectively. With my background, one of the things I always wanted to be able to do is when I sat at the table to be able to communicate between different interests. So one of those things, having a technical background, but also having soft skills and a legal background, I'm able to see issues 360. And our team is the same way. They're all multidisciplinary professionals. And so what that helps us to do when we go into situations is that we see not only problems or challenges holistically, but also solutions. So we never want to tackle solutions in urban environments, which are normally very complicated from one angle alone or from an isolated perspective. Because just if like we're talking about housing today, it's also impacted by transportation. It's also impacted by green spaces, by economic opportunities that are available. And so having that frame of reference to see things from a full view impacts how we work with our clients, how we work with communities, and the solutions that we are honored to create.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know, a lot of people do a lot of things, but the from the technical aspect of civil to the legal aspect to the overall leadership and you know consulting aspect of having those soft skills to communicate things effectively. Your background really is truly diverse. So I imagine you have a lot of success whenever you put all those things together. You know, I understand your firm specializes in creating equitable development plans.
Yes.
Can you discuss the key components of these plans, what they are, and how they address systematic disparities in communities?
Absolutely. We're actually in the thick of one right now. We will start core engagement for it next week in a community in South Dallas. But The way that I explain it often is equitable development plans center or identify three groups. First, we work to make sure that the needs of existing residents are met. Often in development, existing or legacy residents, as we like to call them, are left out of the conversation. And as development and investment is brought into their communities, their needs are not often taken into consideration or prioritized. Equitable development looks at that in a very different way and flips it on its head, where that group is prioritized in the planning and engagement and understanding what needs exist in the community and also what assets are there as well. Secondly, we look at a group that we like to say we're welcoming them back. So people that have left the neighborhood for a multitude of reasons. It could have been for lack of opportunity, it could have been displacement pressures, but we work to create pathways where they can come back and thrive as the community continues to grow. And then the final group is those who are new to the community and finding ways that they can come in and be a part of the growth, but in a way that's culturally respectful. So they don't come in and try to completely change the narrative or the culture of the neighborhood, but find ways where they can be a part of how the neighborhood can grow together. And so when in our approach, it's holistic, and you'll hear me say that a lot, or a 360 perspective, because again, in most of the neighborhoods that we serve, there are a number of things that are happening, and it could be a neighborhood in South Dallas or a neighborhood in Frisco. And we've had, experience in both of those situations, and it's still making sure that the neighborhood can grow in a holistic way, in a way where everyone is included and is properly recognized and respected as growth happens. What I would say with how they shape neighborhood growth is one, they make sure that you're respectful of the people that are there, the history that's there as far as the place, but then it looks holistically at different solutions, like I mentioned before. So we look at housing. Most of these plans normally have an anchor that they're looking to build around. So in one case, it was a park. In the case that we're working on now, it's housing, and that's the anchor of the plan. But then we build out other pillars, looking at social determinants of health, and then also other equitable development principles to help us build out a plan that helps the neighborhood grow in a way that's thorough and that looks more than at just one component of it. So if we're doing housing, again, let's look at transportation, let's look at job growth, let's look at education. Let's also look at a healthy environment and what that means, not only medical access, but how do we include parks and green space, walking trails where people can actually get out and know their neighbors. That's another social component. So those are the ways that we look to build both socially, or I'll say all three: economically, socially, and environmentally, whole communities.
That makes all the sense in the world. I love how you broke it out into the various groups, the folks who are there, the folks who are coming back, and the folks who are going to be new to the area. You know, all too often, I'm sure you found in your research and your work that people really focus on just that last group, the group, the new folks, and not the other groups that you mentioned. I'm curious if how you deal with whenever what is desired for the new folks is sometimes in conflict with what is desired for the folks who've been there, the folks that are coming back. How do you deal that, and how do your plans how do they get used to kind of smooth out those situations and make it a holistically good development?
So one thing I love that you said, how are they used? Because that's always our goal. We never make plans to sit on the shelf.
Mm.
They're always for intentional action. And normally throughout the planning process, we try to find at least one thing that we can start to implement with our clients during the process. So we get things moving beforehand. But what I would say, there's always going to be competing interest when you have more than one person at the table. And so the way that we deal with that is one, having conversations. So engagement is a key part of understanding what competing interests exist. And then from there, what we try to do is find solutions that are a compromise. And we like to say there's like a toolkit or a roadmap. So we give you different things that you can pull out for different scenarios and situations. Just like if you're building a home, you won't use a hammer where you need a screwdriver. So we try to find different solutions that you can pull out as needed in community. And the other thing is looking at the core challenge or the core desire. So a lot of times what people say they may want or the desire they may have or the challenge they may be facing is often a symptom of whatever the larger problem or larger desire is. So part of our job is getting down to that core desire or core challenge and then building solutions around that. More often than not, when you get to that issue or able to identify that core desire, the groups are not that different. It's just the way that it's presented because of their lived experience or because of their personal preferences. And so when you find those two things, then you can create a range of solutions that meets those three different groups where they are. Now, I would say, or you'll hear planners say, a good plan means that everybody's a little frustrated because nobody has gotten everything that they want. That means you're doing your job well, because there has to be compromise, right? Communities are just like families. You have to compromise a bit. You won't always get everything that you want, but in the areas where there's a need that's more critical or a desire that is more dominant, we do our best to make sure that the plan matches that, but also where there is compromise, reasonable compromise within all other aspects of the plan, and that community members are a part of that. So it's not a surprise to them when the final plan comes out, and we don't come in saying we know the best solution, day one. It's a very collaborative process. So in working with them to find solutions, we're also able to kind of bridge that gap between because we bring everybody to the table.
That's great. That's really good, and I see how that could lead to great communities. So you mentioned your clients. Who typically is your client, the actual entity or group that's utilizing this plan and the service that you're providing?
So that's utilizing equitable development plans or just our clients in general?
I guess both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So equitable development plans, we normally like to work with what we call an anchor institution. So that's someone that's been in the community for years, that already has the respect of local neighbors. They've already been doing the work, and that allows us to come in and act as a partner both to them and to the community. So that can be either a nonprofit organization, it could be a local government, whether that's like a regional government or a municipality. In one, we worked in Buffalo, we were brought in by a civic organization. And then in other circumstances, it can be philanthropic organizations that are sponsoring the work, and they're also partnering with a local institution or quarterback, in some ways as they're called, to help steward this work. The reason we like to do it that way is because while our project has a defined start and end date, these organizations are anchored continuously in the neighborhood. And so one, it gives a community a point person or a point organization to go back to if they have questions once the plan is completed. It also creates accountability because that group's already in existence. It's already been doing the work. So the community, again, knows who to go back to ask. And then it's also building their capacity, right? If they're already doing good work, we don't have to come in and try to reinvent the wheel. We can just help the wheel move faster and more smoothly. And so that's how we see our job, as coming in as a resource and a partner to move these things forward. Overall for our business, like I said, we work with organizations and businesses and governments that are mission focused. And what we're looking at is, we like to say, most consumers and most residents want to work with companies that care, and cities that are good neighbors, right? Or local governments that are good neighbors. So we come in as a partner to help them do that work. And we normally bring in an expertise that does not exist, or we bridge a capacity gap for them. And again, in that process, our goal is to help them understand what challenges are there, what untapped opportunities exist, and then how we can use existing resources, local partnerships, and funding to help start to address these things. And I always say start, because one plan will not solve everything, but we can be a part of kickstarting efforts or building momentum in communities. But it's going to take a lot of work to get communities, especially those that have been disinvested over decades, back to where they should be, where they can actually thrive and grow.
A lot of work. So you'll be working with a local stakeholder, a municipal government, or a local nonprofit, or something of that nature, who will bring you in. You'll work to analyze the problem, kind of understand what sort of things need to come together in this plan, what we really want to accomplish, and then that nonprofit or municipal government will then work with a developer to get it to be to actually implement the plan and have it, and they as a local presence they'll be able to make sure that the community has buy-in, and the zoning that needs to happen happens, and the approvals that need to happen, and that's kind of how it works. I just want to make sure I have a full picture of the how it goes.
Yes, so that's mostly correct. So we also are a part of implementation in communities as well, depending on the partner. So one, continuing that historical knowledge of the project, historical knowledge of the community, and helping to bring the plan to life.
Yeah.
So it can be either where we stay on as an advisor, where we're on as a consultant, where we're sharing advice or solutions for particular problems or projects as they arise, or we can help with implementation of the plan. And that's taking it from literally the written page to reality. So one of the neighborhoods where we've done that is the Bottom District in Oak Cliff. And so we did a plan with them. He started in 18, the end of 18 through 19, we finished it. And that plan was a part of a planning grant. Then it was applied, they took it back, then became a part of an implementation grant to put those ideas into action. And so we worked with them on affordable housing, on beautification, on stormwater and flood mitigation and management, and it's a number of other opportunities in that community. But it was lifting out what we saw from the plan and saying, how can we tactically put this in place? What policies can we help move forward? And then what programs can we implement to make sure that this plan, again, doesn't sit on the shelf, but it comes to life? And so that was a 6-year process, still moving forward. Things are still working there and being brought to life. But that's what I say when the plans are just the beginning. Like, this gives you a roadmap and a guide of how to move forward. And then you bring in other partners and other resources. We can stay on as advisors and implementation guides to bring the plan to life. But absolutely.
That's really cool, and I actually live in Oak Cliff myself, and would love to learn a little bit more about that, and kind of use that as a bit of a case study for us to explore and understand how that works. Can you speak a little bit more on kind of who you were working with, maybe with the city and then locally, and other people that you brought in, and just kind of how that process really looked?
Absolutely. So the anchor institution there is the Golden Seeds Foundation, and they have been around for almost 20 years, but they're an extension of Golden Gate Baptist Church. And so the church has been, I think it's coming up on its 100-year anniversary. And it's, of course, being there that long and offering services is definitely what we call an anchor institution. And so the community was a part of a grant by JP Morgan Chase, and it was a number of other organizations in Southern Dallas, 5 other organizations. A CDFI was leading the process, and we came on as a project manager for the planning grant. And then once the planning grant happened, it was successful. JP Morgan Chase awarded at that time its largest grant ever for implementation. And then we stayed on to help them move from project management of the overall grant to work with that organization to move the things identified forward in their community. So one of the initiatives was affordable housing. And I will note all of this, or a good bit of this, was during the pandemic. So it was an interesting exercise. Yes. So the first portion we're looking at was affordable housing and beautification. And affordable housing is clear. At the time, the neighborhood had about 70% vacancy. And it was figuring out, one, how do we get people back into the neighborhood to establish, some social component of the neighborhood. Now, there were residents there that were very active, that had been there for decades and generations. But we wanted to, as the neighborhood, for the future of the neighborhood, to make sure that there was like a critical mass of residents that could help it to continue, because a lot of those residents were aging as well. And so helping to bring in affordable housing, so that residents could take advantage of its location and be a part of the community. And then next was when you have that much vacancy, there's also attention to detail and upkeep that may not have been at the same level. So the next part of that was thinking about how do we beautify this community? How do we bring it back to that sense of vibrancy that it had before? And the beautification grant, one, helped us to establish like a sense of place. And so when you go or drive through the Bottom District now, you'll see entryway markers that are, branded for the neighborhood. You'll see street sign toppers, so you know where you are when you enter into the neighborhood. We also put in trees to help with the tree canopy, because we all know Texas gets hot in the summer. Well, for most of the year, it's hot. That's the main season. And so adding some more shade to decrease some of the heat there. And then one of the other projects that we worked on, so that grant, both of those projects were with the city of Dallas. And the other grant was through North Central Texas Council of Government, and that was the storm mitigation and, excuse me, stormwater mitigation or stormwater catchment and flooding mitigation. And that was the creation of a community rain garden. So it was in part to help with those two things, but also to show other neighbors how they could incorporate native plants to help reduce those same issues in their own neighborhood or backyard. So that was one positive thing educationally as well. And then another part of the beautification grant that once we got to about midway through, realized that the city was also doing improvements to the local park. And so instead of trying to do something in silo, what we said was, why don't we partner with the city on this project? Because there was an existing funding gap, help to fill that funding gap, and then bring a resource that can be in the community for 20 to 30 years to come. And so those were some of the different components. This is also working in tandem with infrastructure projects that were going on with federal government dollars with the city, and also putting in lighting to make things a bit safer so that as more residents are coming in, it's easier to walk through your neighborhood. And the city also partnered when we started on that to use ARPA dollars to increase access to broadband. And so they added in Wi-Fi on Denley as one of the pilot projects throughout the city to see how that could help in communities that had limited access to Wi-Fi. And so those are when we talk about like collective, holistic development, improving infrastructure, improving the streets. That was that's a part of that, bringing in a sense of place, improving overall aesthetics, making sure there's recreation, there's affordable housing, and at a range. And so those things, that development with affordable housing spurred market rate housing and some, in the middle, but there were already provisions in place to kind of help with style, with size, to make sure that the neighborhood could, again, grow together and that it look so disparate between existing homes and those that were new. And then there were also programs to help existing homeowners bring their homes, I want to say up to code, but to help bring them up to a newer standard, because they were aging homes or aging properties, so that they could have, a home that was nice, that was in good condition as well. And then there was one home that was completely redone for a senior, over $100,000 of investment through a city program there as well. So, and there was also private dollars that came in. Those donors may not be named, so I will leave that to them. Everybody doesn't want that spotlight, but there were private donations as well that helped to spur this work over time and that are still supporting work as it continues to go in the neighborhood.
That's awesome. Really cool. Couple questions on that. First, so in terms of your role, so are you overseeing kind of the money coming in as well as these various funding sources that you mentioned, and the various projects that are going on, whether it's the lighting or the rain garden or the beautification? Are you overseeing that flow of capital and then selecting a, say, lighting contractor to come in and put the lighting in? Is that kind of all rolling up to you, or how does that work?
Yes, on certain projects it has. Like I'll say, depending on the project, we may have another partner that does it. So like with housing, that was not our role on that project, but for the others, like managing the day-to-day, managing the project budgets, making sure we stay on track with that, because budgets are real and you do have to respect them. That was also a part of our job as well. And then finding the most economical partner, but also those that were skilled and had the requisite expertise for the project. And a lot of times as well with nonprofits, one of the benefits is that you will have people who are willing to donate their time and their expertise. And so that I cannot, stress that enough. And then that was one of the things that definitely helped to move some of the projects forward. But there were, a number of other times where it was, a traditional business transaction, and being mindful of that, making sure we stay not only on budget, but also on time. When you get into permitting and you're coordinating between multiple entities, that's one of the things you definitely have to be mindful of and proactive about, because as you make promises to the community and to your partners, they're looking for you to stay on track. And that's a part of our commitment as well. We always like to say we over deliver on the quality of our work, and also maintaining the budget and the timeline so that we keep our word not only to our partner or our client, but also to the communities or other entities that we serve.
Wow, that's really cool. That is a beast of a quarterbacking endeavor, really, to manage all of that. And I'm sure, when these grants go out, the city loves when someone like you is involved with your background, because it's like, oh, well, I understand that, I understand this, and so you can really kind of put those things together. As it relates to the housing piece that you mentioned, can you talk to that a little bit in terms of how the affordable housing was provided? Who you worked with there? Was it kind of an existing affordable housing, or was it a new affordable housing that was created? Or can you talk a little bit about the housing piece?
Yeah, so I'll say two pieces: one, maintaining affordable housing, and then two, creating new affordable housing options. So that process, again, like I said, Golden Seeds was the Golden Seeds Foundation was the anchor institution there. And as a nonprofit, the money, of course, would flow to them, or funding would flow to them. So one of the things, or they would help neighbors access funding through other governmental resources. So one of the ways that I mentioned earlier was for maintaining affordability. That was making sure existing homes could be upgraded and that homeowners could have access to funding that would allow them to do that. So like the minor home improvement program through the city was one way in helping residents get through that process, understanding what it meant and what kinds of funds they could access that would help them to do, like minor repairs on their home to bring things up to code. And to bring it up to a better living quality for them. Other portions was construction of new homes, and that was also done through a grant through the city, through a notice of funding availability. And that was a combination of grants and land acquisition at a, say, discounted rate, very discounted rate for the neighborhood now, but it was to help reduce development cost so that the homes could be built at a rate or an amount that would be affordable to community members moving in. It's really meant to reach 80% AMI or less. Now that has changed tremendously since COVID. That project was impacted by change in supply chain, with access to resources, with shortage of, available contract. There was a lot of things that happened with that, as I'm sure everybody else experienced in the same period of time. But the key there was finding a great contractor, a great architect, and someone that could understand the nuances of the community and create designs that were reflective of the culture and history there, that while they were new and the scale might look a little, or design might look a little different, that it didn't feel like the homes were just kind of plopped in from somewhere else. And so there were different design styles. There are townhomes. There are some that are attached, semi-detached, traditional single family homes, but a variety, right? Because not everyone needs the same housing solution. And that was a part of that project, to make sure that it was created in a way that the residents that were coming in or moving back actually had choice in what they selected. And then the other development partner there was Innovon Neighborhoods. So and I would say all of the entities that were involved in that had a personal tie to the community, which also made that project a bit richer in how it met the needs of the community as well.
That's very cool. And quick shout out to Innovation Neighborhoods. That's a great organization that I'm very familiar with. That's awesome. Your and this is your doctoral research, which is amazing given, all the, the various areas you already have such, detailed knowledge and study. But you're in top of that, your doctoral research focused on green gentrification.
Mhm.
How does this phenomenon impact communities in Dallas, and what strategies do you recommend to mitigate displacement while promoting environmental improvement?
Right. So green gentrification, for those who aren't familiar, is gentrification that happens when either a green amenity is added or a hazard is removed. And so with that, what I looked at in my dissertation was how can green improvements impact housing price? And so again, get back to housing and the connection between things in urban environments. And with that, I looked at the Katy Trail and I was like home prices before construction, during construction, and after, how they changed, and then how that was different in Dallas versus the surrounding neighborhoods of Katy Trail, and was able to see like through a call multi-panel longitudinal analysis over decades and over time the changes in the neighborhood. And what I would say with this phenomenon, Dallas has a great park system and it is growing, and I'd love to visit them all. But what also happens with that is parks bring people. If you ask 100 people, probably 95 to 99 of them will say, I would love to live close to a park.
Yeah.
It offers so many benefits, whether that's social benefits, physical benefits, just getting mental benefits, being able to get out and have a break. It creates community. It's one of the places where your socioeconomic status really doesn't matter. And you'll see people talking. Often their dogs will bring them together and the dogs start the conversation. But they are wonderful vehicles for community development.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens with that is once a park goes in, speculation happens. So, or once it's announced, you'll see people starting to buy up property because they want park front property or park access. You'll also see prices starting to rise on available properties, and you'll start to see taxes go up around the area because value has been added. So, one of the things or ways that we look to address that is also through equitable development plans. There are other things that can be put in place, like policies to help mitigate the increase in tax over time, where you can limit how much of an increase per year that happens. There are other buffers that you can put into place as well, other districts that you may be able to create to help to existing residents kind of move more slowly into the increased value so that they are not displaced. And displacement happens over time. It's not just one thing or a monolith. So there are different types of displacement pressures that can happen, cultural change, there's things that happen as far as like tax pressures that can move. And then there's also pressures once you're getting in, like whether you can maintain the home in that space. And then there are other things that happen between new residents and existing residents, that friction that happens sometime when a new lifestyle moves into a neighborhood and it may not be congruent with what existed there. And so that's what we talked about at first, those three different groups where we try to kind of massage some of those tensions through our process. But equitable development helps with that. It helps you to leverage new investment for community benefit and for all of the community's benefit, to make sure they are part of the process, that they can, share their input, that buffers are put in place as well. So those homes that are the nearest to the park are impacted less negatively by the increase in traffic and noise, so that buffers are created and that there are other protections in place. So equitable development plans can walk you through all of those things. Policy platforms are another one that can be helpful there when you're moving through, so the community has a unified voice and how they want to be seen, how they want to be included, how they want to be protected. That can be shared with city officials. With that, like one of the examples of that was we did that with West Dallas and worked with community residents there on a policy platform, as there are a lot of changes that are happening around them with development, with park planning, and to make sure that early in the process that their voice was unified in a written document that they could easily share, they could easily discuss between their groups, and they could easily take to the city for implementation and support. So those are just a few ways that the services that we use to help communities navigate those different changes.
That's huge. I mean, because you hear something like green gentrification. I hadn't heard that phrase specifically before. I like it. And it's so important, like you say, that the existing residents really get that benefit, because it's, very sad if the city, is trying to improve a particular community and they're doing good things, putting money into it and doing improving, the green area. But then then on the downside is that the residents might have to, incur those higher taxes, and you really that planning just does seem, very, very key in all of that. Um, so tell me, what is your vision, I guess, for, Dallas's urban spaces in terms of equity and inclusion? And you can kind of wrap that together with, what is the future for C-suite consulting, and any, future projects that you're working on that you want to preview or share with us, anything like that?
Absolutely. So I would say for Dallas moving forward, I think there is a good movement now, or so we reach kind of a close to critical mass on having a number of different organizations that are looking at this work from different perspectives, just like the Dallas Housing Coalition. Everybody has a different role that we can play. And what we're doing better at, I believe, is doing that collaboratively, like working together. So we don't have 50 different groups working on the same issue, but we may have 50 different groups working on different nuances of that issue so that everything is being covered from, again, a holistic perspective. That has been extremely encouraging to see that increase over time. And I believe if we continue that, we'll begin to move the city forward in the direction that we would like to see it go. The other part of that I would say, we're all familiar with what's happened with DEI over the years, especially over the last few months. But one of the things that I've always said, and we're not your traditional like DEI type firm, we do kind of fall under that category to some extent. But what we like to say in how you approach anything with equity, diversity, or inclusion is that it shouldn't be an initiative. It shouldn't be a program. It should be something that's a part of the culture of how you do your work, something that informs how you approach challenges. Because when we have a diversity of thought, when we have a diversity of people at the table, we are inclusive of ideas that are a bit different from us, and we think about how we can all grow together and how we can address issues that may have been present over time, what we do is create more resilient communities. We create spaces that are more vibrant because now we're considering things from a multitude of perspectives, which means it's harder for us to miss things that are important as we craft solutions. And so that's the way that we like to think about it. One of the reasons for us why engagement is important, and hearing from a number of different voices to inform solutions works well when you're looking to create something that will last over time. Just like the adage says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And so we take that collaborative approach and that idea to heart and how we do our work. For C-Suite Equity Consulting, one of the things we are excited about, and actually is going out to our newsletter very soon, is that we will be doing more training. So we'll be adding more training around data, around engagement, culturally responsive engagement and what that looks like, data and how to actually what it is for a lot of people. It's kind of like this word, and they have somebody to do that, but really understanding what data is, where you can find it, different sources, how you can use it in your company or organization to inform your decisions, and then how you can use that to also measure your impact. And that leads into one of the newer services that we're doing or leaning more into. Is we've done it in part in our work, but now pulling it out where it can be a standalone, but doing more with metrics and evaluation. So one of the things that we found, especially in our current climate, is that good stories are great and they are impactful, but numbers move the needle. And especially when you're talking to funders and to other partners, they want to be able to quantify your impact. And so that's one of the areas where we're expanding our services to serve our clients better, and to help them tell their stories in a way that's not only compelling, but that's actually backed by data. And that's one of the ways that, say, when we talk about implementation, the back part of that, or what comes next, is that accountability and impact piece. Now we've done the plan, we've put it into action. Now, what story can we tell based on the work that we've done? How do we capture that and make sure that that story does not go unnoticed, but that now that it's pushed forward and is presented in a way that encapsulates fully our work and the impact that we've had. So those are the two areas that we're looking, training, and then moving more into metrics and evaluation. So we can take our clients from a community survey, community strength and needs assessment, equitable development plan, then to metrics and evaluation. So the full life cycle of a project to make sure they're supported from beginning to end.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carter. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing your unique perspective with us. Before we sign off today, do want to encourage you to attend the Dallas Housing Coalition's next event, our Dallas City Council meet and greet, 3 to 5 p.m., Thursday, April 17th at the Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity's Wall Shop. Follow our socials for updates on how you can get more involved with the Dallas Housing Coalition and stay connected with our Housing for All webinar series. Please also visit our website at dallashousingcoalition.com to learn more about our member organizations, like in this house, and to join the coalition. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in to our 41st Housing for All webinar, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. Dr.